Hey guys, welcome back. This is another XFX tutorial, and this one's going to be about the cab module. So let's just dive right in. So on the right hand side here, these are some notes that I think would be rather useful for people to take a look at, as they're if they want to follow along, they can. If not, no worries. They're here for you to maybe jot down or make note of. So all we've got here is a cab. What we're going to do today is we're going to take the cab module and make it sound relatively different and neat on its own without an amplifier. All I've got is an RTA in line here. So you can hear it's just pretty basic as of right now. So let's go and describe what each thing is like I usually do. So up here we got the picker. The picker is organized initially by size. 1x4, 1x6, it goes up to all the way up to 4x12. Right here, go back a little bit, 4x12s, and you can go back to 1. You know, you can have this one basically has a bunch of different presets, so you can have different cabs kind of selected before you even get anywhere. I'm personally going to stick with the 1x8 amplifier this time around, so that's what we're doing. So that's what the picker does, and that's what that option right there does. This one you can select different cabs based on just the number. M means mute, so all of these are currently muted, but if I unmute one, it becomes available. So we can have dual cabs just coming from a single cab module. And then S means solo, means you're only going to hear that cab. And then over here on input mode, you can have left, right, stereo, or some left, right, which I assume is sort of like a mono. And that is about it for the first one. So let's give a little bit of tinkering with these knobs right here, and also describe what these low, high slopes are. I think I've probably mentioned these in previous videos, but we'll go and get a hold of them right now anyways. So the level is actually probably the most could be confusing of all of the parameters inside of this module, or at least this subsection of the module, because it is relative. It is not absolute. So the only way that this is actually going to be really used, I would imagine, is if you have another one on. So let's go ahead and grab 2 of these, and I'll show you what I mean. So the pan is how much of the signal, as you can see right over here, how much of the signal is on the left or the right. Negative being left, positive being right. So right now, 75% of the signal is on the left from this cab, and 75% of this signal is on the right. So meaning you're going to get 25% on the other end. So 25% of this right-hand signal is still going to be on the left speaker. So that's what that means. And then the level, right now, they're both set equal, but if you have any sort of, if you will listen to this on headphones, you'll be able to tell the difference in this. So right now it's very equal. If I drop this thing down to 40, you're going to hear mostly on the right speaker. And remember, these levels are relative and they're normalized. So you're actually not getting all of the signal washed away. It's actually washing away part of the frequency content, but because part of that frequency content is so reduced in decibel, you're not going to notice it, but it's not gone. So turn that back up, turn this all the way down. Now you'll hear everything from the left. Sounds pretty nice. So that's what that does. Low cut, if you want less lows, you boost up the low cut. You can do that on both just so you can hear it. Actually, you know what? Let's just solo this cab, show you that does. Notice the lows are a little bit more present as I reduce the low cut. Increase the low cut all the way up, you're going to hear less lows. And then I'll do this one on high cut. Let's go all the way down here. Not hear as much highs. Drop it down to 2,000, really make it noticeable. So get rid of solo on that. Get rid of solo on that one, huh? Try it out. Drop it even further. Increase it all the way back up. You hear the difference. So that's what that does. All right, let's move on to cab and more. And also, let's do this in stereo, right? Oh. Because right now I'm listening to a stereo. All right, so cab and more. So first things first is everything up here stays the same, but the IR length is a new option. So you can change the IR, which basically changes the fidelity of the modeling. So if there's certain frequency content within some bins in here, see how this is currently it's set to 128 bands, but you can imagine in between each of these, if you multiply this by about 10 or so, or 9, you'd end up with roughly 1024, which is an option here. And as you increase this IR length, the higher the fidelity of the modeling becomes. So you increase this, you're also increasing CPU usage, but the lower this is, the lower fidelity it becomes. So the more effects you add into this thing, let's see if we reduce both of these. Maybe I don't think we're going to be able to tell a difference very much right now, but as the CPU usage goes up, you might be able to. Actually, you kind of can. Sounds much richer, right? So you can hear that. So that's what that's the IR length does. So you can get rid of some frequency content by tinkering with those a little bit. So proximity is how basically it's a low and high frequency content adjustment again. So we'll increase this and just show you what it does. Actually, we'll solo this just so you can see. Go back up here, put this pan to 0, set this equal to left, and we'll just keep that going just like that. Increase proximity. Increase it. As you can hear, the bass content is continuously increasing. And it sounds pretty nice if you can tinker around with that some. So proximity frequency, this changes basically what the proximity effect is actually doing. So if I wanted to, I could increase this, and you're hearing more of this specific frequency within it. Does that make sense? All right. Let's go ahead and drop this down to, I don't know, let's say 5. And smoothing, it also reduces the peaks, like drastic peaks and changes within the signal. So I think it does that by some averaging. You can actually find that out. I might be able to do so on the forums and let you know later on in the comments. But as you can increase this, it kind of smooths it out. Uses, I'm assuming, some sort of interpolation and averaging. Just sounds like there's not so much jaggedness in the signal, at least as far as I'm concerned. Maybe you hear something different. So let's keep on moving on. I'll set this back down to 0. All right, so we're back on to preamp, and so the first parameter here we can tinker with is the preamp type. And over here in the notes, I've kind of noted my favorites, which are modern, transformer, and vintage. I haven't found that the other ones, at least on low distortion amps and whatnot, to be completely noticeable. I prefer to play a lot of clean stuff, so I could probably tinker with this more with a high gain, and this is probably where you'd hear it more. But for me, I personally like modern, vintage, and transformer. You can go ahead and try these out real quick. Let's go down to transformer. last one, vintage. And then this preamp mode is basically whether or not it's going to be using higher quality modeling. So high quality modeling just means more CPU usage for the most part. If you notice that your CPU usage is going way up towards like the 75, 80s, there's some of these things that you can do in order to save on that so that, you know, you don't have to be using so much of the CPU, and eventually the higher the CPU usage in this program, the less effective your modeling is going to be, and you might hear some delays and it might not be quite as accurate as you would hope to be. So try to keep that in mind. Of course, this thing can run all the way up to 100%, but, you know, you're also risking, you know, it gets hotter. So obviously this thing, the hotter it gets, the less the performance as well. And it starts to do things that you might not expect. So drive and saturation are just like drive and saturation on any other kind of drive pedal. Increase the drive, this VU all of a sudden starts to become available. I'll show you without it. VU does not show up at all. You increase the drive, the VU starts to show up. And you also start to hear some drive, but the saturation's 0, right? So you don't hear much of a distortion. Here, I'll grab a pick so you can hear a little bit better once I pick on this. Let's drop this down to 6 and increase saturation up slowly. Let's jack this up to 10. You hear how there's already some distortion just with a cab. Just with a cab. Increase that to 7. It's pretty crazy. So you can introduce distortion without even really having to use an amp or a drive. So this is another option, right? You can see why this is a powerful module in and of itself. So drop those back down. Tones and filters, those are things that you've already seen in other modules, such as the amp, such as the input. These are all things that you've already seen. But I'll tell you anyways, bass, mids, and trebles, you're just boosting or reducing those frequencies based on dB. Filters, low cuts and high cuts, you literally saw these, something very, very similar right here. So it's nothing new, but they're available to you in the preamp of the cabinet as well, if you're using a preamp. So remember, if you take this off, the filters are still active. It's kind of an important note. If this is still set to none, the filters are still active. Room and air. I honestly really like this part of the cab. This is probably where I get the most out of what changes your signal in here. You drop this thing back to 60% and 30 and increase room diffusion maybe to 25. This sounds pretty wildly different. It's almost like adding some reverb, right? You hear that slap back a little bit? Let's see what these do. All right, so room size, kind of pretty self-explanatory. It's the size of the room in meters. Room level is how much of the mic, like basically how much the mic'd room or amp in the room kind of sound you're going to get. And then the hall and room, they're both different. They got different sonic qualities. That means the room that they modeled could have different flooring. Who knows? I'm not entirely sure what the room looked like. Maybe it's a rectangle versus a square. Those are all things that are not really available to you as far as like what they did. I'm sure it's probably, you know, kind of packed away in some of their copyrights. So floor reflections, that's how much of the signal is bouncing off the floor and back into another mic. Room diffusion, how much of the signal is being diffused by the room itself, whether or not that's carpet in the room, posters, rugs hanging on the wall, whatever it is. That's what this is doing. And then LF, low frequency, high frequency damping, how much of these frequencies are being damped. You can tell what these are doing simply by changing the knob. So if I want some low frequency damping, you're going to hear less low frequencies. Notice how some of the... Actually, let's just do that real quick. So you get more lows with low frequency damping all the way down. High frequency damping, you increase that up, the highs will disappear. So you can do that. Mic spacing. So the spacing is adding basically a narrow to wide kind of feel to it. Best way to describe this is just by taking a listen, right? If you're listening to this via headphones, stereo headphones, you can probably hear this difference a bit. I personally kind of like this at around 45, I think. A little bit more, but let's try 50. Actually sounds real nice. All right, and so finally, air in the room air tab is going to be, you can introduce an airiness to your tone. And so this is actually kind of interesting as well because you're introducing high frequency air, but this air, you can actually adjust the frequency of which it sounds. So per se, I bring this right up to 100%, right? And per se, I throw it at 2500 hertz. So the air frequency is at 2500. I'm not sure if you can hear the difference much. Or you can be specific about it. So in my example down here, 5274 is actually a harmonic of the E tone. So per se, you're writing a song in E, and you want to give that extra sonic tone, right? That boost of E, like you want to make them feel it in their bones, maybe, right? You can change this frequency. You can go right over to Google, right, and type in E frequency, and that one's happens to be like 374, I think. And you multiply that by 16, ends up at 5274. So you're adding a harmonic of the E tone to just the bass of the amp, like for the cab, I mean. And so what that kind of does for you is it gives you some extra oomph to whatever you're doing. You can add that right into your cab. It's pretty cool, in my opinion, the fact that you're able to do that. So that's what this all does. Let's drop this to 25. And I think overall this sounds pretty nice right now. And if you've been following right along with me, this, maybe you want to save this. Actually, I'll show you one more thing before I go ahead and save something. So right now, we've got it soloed, right? So now I unsoloed it. Now we've got 2 of these. And according to my example right here, you can tell just how interesting this is, right? So let's just go ahead and bring this up to like 300 and what is it? 263.9 millimeters, which ends up landing on the 1 millisecond mark. And I'm not sure if you can notice it really, it's kind of hard to tell, but these are all kind of things that you're going to notice if you just do this simply, right? You hear that slight phasing? It's almost kind of like a super minor chorus. It's like wow, 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 wow. That's what's going on right here. You're hearing that 1 millisecond phase offset. And you can do that. You can, per se, you want this one there and you want this one here, right? It's still going to be phase offset, but now there's a delay in the signal even up to this one. But what I would do, me personally, I really like it like this. And that's just for the amp cab. or the cab module right here. So, you know, not a bad little module considering how powerful it is and how much you get out of it. Right? And now that I've panned both left and right, when we go to align this, it's going to be shifting, modulating between the left and right because there's a phase offset between the alignment of the microphones. So that's what that's doing, and that's how you can kind of tinker with this thing in order to sound pretty good all on its own. Now you start adding an amp, such as one of my favorites, the 5F1 Tweed, and then per se, just for kicks, you add a chorus and a reverb, right? And you know, mind you, I didn't really do anything crazy with any of these, but now you'll probably end up with a pretty nice sounding chain here. Sounds pretty nice. But alright guys, that's it for now. If you have any feedback for me, what I could do to make this better, please leave it in the comments. I really appreciate it. Some guy told me he didn't like the background music as loud. It was distracting. I'm taking your word for it, man. I'm leaving background music out of this one. I think it will help. It'll make a difference. So appreciate everyone taking a look and listen. Ciao for now.